Good afternoon and welcome subscribers. I appreciate it's been some time since I uploaded a video, and this video is specifically for my students in Year 11 who are about to embark upon their trial exam, their mock exam. As you know, we're going to focus on microeconomics because we have not yet completed the macroeconomics course, and your paper, as outlined in this particular brief, will consist of 20 multiple choice papers and 3 longer answer questions. I want to tell you about the things which you really need to zoom in on and focus on for your exam, and they are as follows. Here they are. Number 1, bring a calculator. Number 2, make sure that you're able to use that calculator to calculate things like profit. So be prepared to be given data which outlines, for example, quantity of units purchased, the purchase price, the total costs involved, and then you might have to manipulate that data to find profit or profit per unit or something along those lines. Make sure that you are absolutely familiar with your elasticity diagrams. That will be price elasticity of demand, but also price elasticity of supply. Very important. Make sure that you've really got those to a T. And also, make sure when we're talking about calculations, can you calculate gross pay and can you calculate net pay? Well, that's an answer for you. That's a question for you to answer, rather, in your revision time. Okay, let's talk a little bit now, ladies and gentlemen, about things that you might have to go into in a little bit more detail. Now, in recent exam series, I would say 90% of the time, there has always been a question on economies of scale. So I would say it's a fair chance that you might need to prep something for economies of scale. Not only the advantages, but also the disadvantages in the form of diseconomies of scale as a company, as an organisation grows too big. Make sure that you are familiar with the whole notion of competition, so monopoly on the one hand, perfect market on the other, but more specifically, make sure that you're able to explain and analyse with a diagram what some of the pros and cons are of having increased competition. So, on the high street, for example, what are the pros and cons of there being more competitors shops, something which of course in high streets today is actually disappearing because we're not using and shopping on the high street in the same way as we used to because we all shop online. Anyway, I digress. Next, think about the factors of production: land, labour, capital, enterprise. Think about the rewards that they earn, but also then think about how producers use those in order to provide goods and services. Now really here we're hinting at the whole notion of price elasticity of supply. Percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. Know the equation, know that if it's greater than 1 it's elastic, if it's less than 1 it's inelastic, but more importantly, know what that means from the point of view of a producer. So, if I'm growing Christmas trees, the supply of my Christmas trees will be very inelastic, at least in the short term. Why is that? Well, because I cannot simply produce out of thin air 100 more Christmas trees. I have got to plan in advance, and in advance I can then produce the Christmas trees. So in the longer term, I could make the price elasticity of supply more elastic. Now that's got important consequences for me, because if I am asked, for example, as a producer to provide more, I would need a certain lead time. I couldn't just magic them out of thin air. Be aware of that. Be aware of the determinants of price elasticity of supply. They're all in your textbook, they're all in your exercise book. We've considered things like stocks, for example. If, Sports Direct, let's say they've got a massive warehouse full of stock. Well, that means if they run out on the shelves, they just go to this warehouse and they replenish. So the supply is very elastic. You can easily meet more demand. So price isn't going to change a lot. Whereas if I had Christmas trees on a shelf, let's say, in Sports Direct, and they all sold out, and I haven't grown anymore, I have no stock. So as the stocks run out, the rationing device that would happen would be that price would rise because they're very inelastic in supply, and demand would be climbing that very inelastic supply curve. So very important notion that of price elasticity of supply, and important for this particular exam. And then finally, something which we've been talking about in recent weeks is to do with sustainability and economic growth. Now, you know that as the economy grows, it uses up, China in particular, hoovering up huge amounts of natural resource. Well, these things are going to run out, so there's a sustainability issue. So be aware of that notion of sustainability, be aware that it applies to scarce resources, but also be aware of things that companies are trying to do in order to overcome this problem. So we visited Nissan, for example, not so long ago. And one of the things that they have is they have the Nissan Leaf, which of course is the electric-powered vehicle. And there is a movement towards not only electric motor vehicles, but electric motorcycles as well. And so over time, these things will be replaced with more sustainable, in this case, methods of transport. So you need to be aware of not only what the pros and cons are, but what are the costs and benefits to society of that type of thing. So as we move from petrol to electric, let's say, well, there are pros and cons. So be aware of what those pros and cons are from the point of view of all economic agents, that being consumer, producer, government, the key stakeholders in the economy, and be able to explain that. Now, if you think about all of those things and you learn everything in Chapter 1, you should be absolutely fine. Bye for now.